Love.
You want to sit in the middle or on
Give
the
us
side?
some love.
Yeah, in the middle.
Come on now. I want some love. Amen. Amen. Look at this. I'm so bright. Look at this. I got this jacket just to show up here. Amen.
So how lucky am I to get to sit here and have a conversation with these two? Remarkable. How lucky am I?
We're also lucky.
They do. Neither one of them needs an introduction, so all I'm going to say is it's Donna Brazile and Maureen Dowd, each of whom is at the very top of the world when it comes to the work that they do. And what we are to talk about this morning is, among other things, and principally, women and the news media, and the media broadly. It's hard for me to separate and think about these two things, so what I want to start by asking each one of you is, how do you even think about the role? There are now a lot of women in the media doing important stuff. There are also a lot of women who are very much making their way up the ladder. How do we even think about, or how do you think about, Maureen, I'll start with you, being a woman and being a journalist?
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I don't do much public speaking. You're about to find out why. Judy and I talked about this last night, and I was thinking about it this morning. And when I first started at the New York Times, I felt like journalism was a great profession for women because they had to go with the product. If you wrote a great feature, you were going to get on the front page. It didn't matter whether you were male or female. But then when I started in New York for 4 years, and then I switched to Washington in '86. And when I got into political reporting, that's where this sort of caste system came in, because, you know, immediately they told me, yeah, okay, you can cover the First Lady. And that's what I did. And, you know, the hilarious thing about that when I look back about it is, none of the guys wanted to cover the First Lady. That would have diminished them to even think about it. So we went with Ronald Reagan to, what is it, G something. I don't know what it was in those days. And I think it was fewer countries. But we went to Japan, and I went with Nancy Reagan to Malaysia and, you know, other countries on the way. And, you know, this was so crazy because it turned out there was an assassination plot about her, and that guy, McCarthy, that Secret Service agent who saved Reagan, was her secrets in charge of her security. And he got drunk one night in the bar and told me that he was so scared because they were sending frogmen. So Nancy Reagan turned out to be the story, and later we learned she was the entire story because she was deciding whether, you know, Reagan would negotiate with the Russians. She was, you know, deciding with her astrologer. And so she was running, and she made all the decisions about personnel. She got rid of Lynn Nofziger, and she got rid of Don Regan when he set up his own rose garden as though he were the president. Nancy's like, he's out. So she was running everything, but none of the guys would deign to cover her. So I think I was not the first. There was another woman who was on the White House for a little while before me, but I was like maybe the second woman to cover the White House. So, you know, it's just hard to believe.
Well, Helen Thomas did it for...
Oh, sorry, I meant at the New York Times.
At the time, that's right. But you're right. I mean, but there are so few, you can count them on the fingers of one hand. Donna, so much to think about here, but how do you even think about the work? I mean, you started out, obviously, political strategist. Now you are a commentator,
Yes.
Often seen, well-regarded, a highly regarded commentator. How do you even think about separating your gender from the work you do?
Well, thank you. First of all, let me just say thank you, Judy. When I became a quote-unquote national political commentator, I was hired to work at CNN, and Judy was my first anchor. And what amazing, Judy, 21 years ago.
Lucky me.
And Judy had Bae Buchanan and I on TV, and Bae, as some of you know, the sister of Pat Buchanan, former U.S. Treasurer, and like myself, a former campaign manager. So we had so much fun covering politics. And we didn't cover it from just the left or the right, but we tried to give the perspective of two people who had worked in politics, worked on political campaigns. And for me, Judy was the perfect mentor as I transitioned from being a political strategist, meaning running day-to-day campaigns, to being on TV, being in the news, and being able to talk to the American people. And that's who I try to talk to when I'm on TV. I can't separate who I am from what I say. In large part because I have always used my big mouth throughout my childhood and my life to communicate the things that I believe were important in my life. And while going on CNN in 2001 was a great beginning, I didn't start there. I started back in high school. I wrote for my daily newspaper, and I was very controversial. You know, I don't know what it is about being 16 and hormones, but hell, I was raging. And everybody knew absolutely everything was going on with me, okay? And everything that was going on in my mama's house, and what my daddy was doing in the backyard at night, all right? I wrote about everything. And then years later, while I was still a congressional staffer, I was a chief of staff. I was a staff director of a very important committee, post office and civil service. Hell, somebody had to worry about what was being delivered. I was a radio talk show hostess. And man, I love being on radio because nobody could see me. Maureen, I actually went in some of the best pajamas anyone could ever buy. And nobody didn't, but I had a big mouth. And I wrote for the Daily Reveille at LSU. So I have a profound respect for the First Amendment. I have a profound respect for freedom of speech. I have a profound respect for journalists, those who go to school and major in that important study. But I also understand my role as a political commentator. I have a point of view. And I don't want to make the American people uncomfortable. I try to educate. I try to bring you into the conversation so that you understand why certain individuals or political parties are taking, you know, this point of view or enacting this piece of legislation or executive order. But I also know at times I'm controversial. Hell, I'm controversial. You see how good that is? I can actually sleep with myself and not put the covers over my head. I often, there are times that I know people disagree with me, and that's okay. But as a woman, I have to express myself, but also as a black woman, I come from that tradition of Ida B. Wells. I gotta tell the truth. I gotta make people uncomfortable in order for them to learn that lynching should be outlawed. Or I have to make them uncomfortable when I talk about my body. Hell, I don't like to talk about it, but somebody gotta talk about my body. Yeah, and so, yes, I recognize my role. I recognize the role of both Judy and Maureen, but it's important that we have more women because we're still underrepresented in the media, and that needs to change.
It does. And speaking of that, Maureen, you wrote, you were, what, it was 1991 when you wrote, when you covered the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings. I mean, that was one of the many things that put you on the map originally, and 4 years after that, you became a columnist for the New York Times, but for the Times. But what was it? I mean, that was a terrible moment for women, no question, and you were tough. In fact, I went back and read one of your pieces last night where you quoted a congresswoman named Nancy Pelosi. It was 1991, and what she had to say. But something like what happened then wouldn't happen exactly the same way today, but how might it be covered differently today, do you think?
Well, let me go back, even before that, to after the First Ladies, the first actual political assignment I had was covering the Ferraro campaign. And So we were at the convention when she got appointed, and Bill Kovich was the bureau chief, and I went to him and I said, I'd like to do a feature on how it will be different if a man runs with a woman. Will he be able to hold her hand the way male politicians do up in the air, or, you know, give her a back pat, or what, you know, how will the imagery look different? And he was like, that's a terrible idea. Now, a convention is only 4 days. You know, would he be able to kiss her, like, whatever? So I asked him every day, and on the last day, he goes, all right, you can try it if you really want to. And it was this huge story, because it was so obvious. I mean, the whole world had shifted. Of course it was going to be different. You know, men were bringing her corsages to wear on the campaign trail. And so it's weird, because in those days, as women, we could see something that the guys couldn't, even though it was right there. And the same thing happened with Anita Hill. You know, it was very obvious that it was a bunch of white, middle-aged guys in Congress, which had no sexual harassment laws or rules, and you know, the whole place was droit de seigneur, and they were just completely flummoxed. And even after Anita Hill, I interviewed some of the senators, even Democratic ones, and they were so certain that Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas had had a relationship. They just couldn't, they didn't have the slightest idea of the dynamics of how it works with a woman in the office. You know, with most women, if you left every time a guy said something inappropriate or made a pass, you would never have a career, because you'd be leaving jobs constantly. So, you know, it was a very strange and valuable thing to look at these situations with the eyes of a woman.
And it was, Donna, what, more than 30 years ago that happened. Me Too has come back, you know, roaring back into the front pages of our
That's right.
of our lives. How much have things changed? I mean, we've had Harvey Weinstein, we've had all these other episodes, one after the other. How much has it changed, and how much does it matter that there are more women writing about it, observing, commenting on it?
Well, you know, I constantly ask my students, are we there yet? And the answer is no. I don't believe we scratched the surface. Look, we've made significant changes. We've seen a lot of incremental, symbolic changes. And Maureen, when Maureen was talking, I'm like, hell, man, now she's gonna start dating. Like, yeah, I was at that convention, and then I worked for Ferraro. I worked for Eleanor Holmes Norton in the House Congressional Caucus on Women's Issues. And so when you saw those women march across the tarmac to demand that Anita Hill be heard, with Eleanor Holmes Norton, Jolene Unseld, Barbara Boxer, Anita Lowy, Louise Slaughter, and Patsy Mink. I was the kid, USA Today, Robin Toner, New York Times. And I was the kid who was like trying to tell all of the female reporters, hey, we're going to have this march. Like I was leaking, all right?
Yeah.
Hell, I was leaking a lot back then, because I wanted to give the story to the women reporters, because I knew they would understand the story.
Yeah.
They would understand what Anita Hill was going to say and why it was important that the country hear it. I still think that often when women step up and stand up, they have to sort of qualify themselves, because they know they're going to come under attack. They know that they will be under the same microscope as the person that they're trying to, you know, sort of expose. Say that, you know, this is a pervert. This is someone who has abused their authority. And yet it's hard to tell that story. I can tell you that and Judy, you know, I have to look at the statute of limitations, because, you know, I got to be careful. But there's so many men, and there's some of the men in this writers' conference that I've worked with through the years who have been the best at protecting women in the workplace, at giving women a seat at the table. Men who have had to scoot over. I never asked a man to ever leave the room. Bob Strum, who y'all know. James Carville, even Carl Rove. I've never said scoot over. Hell, I want some salt in my pepper life. Y'all figure that one out, okay? But scoot over, listen to us, let us be players, let us be in the room, let us be heard, and don't touch us. Don't make me have to do something in order to get ahead, because I ain't doing it. All right? We've come a long way, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And it's incumbent not just on women, but men too, to use their power and privileges to ensure that women are able to work or be able to have opportunities without having to go through the full plate of harassments and challenges. It is too much. I try to protect my staffers, my students, my interns. I try to tell them the stories of so many women who did dare to make a difference, but it is still tough. So I'm now talking to my men too. Oh, hell yeah. Because we're not there yet, and we have to tell these stories.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with the amazing Donna. We're not there yet, but it's in a way a more insidious time because it's gotten more subtle. I mean, this is a good example when I was going to work at a news magazine. The editor who offered me the job invited me for a drink, and then he offered me the job, and then he said, well, do you want to spend the night? And it was terrifying because I really needed that job. The Washington Star had folded, the Washington Post hadn't hired me, and I thought, oh my God, if I say no, do I not have this job? And I said, oh, yeah, but my boyfriend's waiting, we're going to celebrate. And he took a quarter out of his pocket, again, that's a long time ago, and pushed it across the table and said, call him. And I just thought, okay, there goes that job, which was a great job. I got out onto the street. It was at the Jefferson Hotel in Washington, and I literally started screaming. I was screaming on the street with anger that he had that power, and my job was gone. So I didn't know whether I was supposed to turn up in New York the following Monday, this was a Friday night, or whether it was all off, nobody said anything. So I just decided to show up. So I get there, and as I entered the office place, a couple of people said to me, wow, do you know you look exactly like so-and-so's wife, which was the editor. And the editor was great to me the whole time I was there. A year later, he took me to lunch and he goes, I'm really sorry about that and thank you for the way you handled it. But again, that's the problem in those days with being a woman. You couldn't react every time something like that was done or you just wouldn't have had any career. It was like Stockholm Syndrome. You just had to constantly be negotiating things. And there was a top editor when I got to the Times on one of these First Lady trips who tried to get me kicked off the trip because, as he told our bosses, I would just be a distraction. He didn't want to deal with a young woman on the trip. And they used to do stuff like that all the time. So things are obviously better now, but the problem is I am scared of how women are being punished in an unsaid way. I still hear that Anita Hill nutty and slutty thing. Guys still try to use that with me about women I'm reporting on. And, I just don't know whether men have totally changed. Certainly they're more scared. And as Donna said, there are a lot of great ones, who help us. But the bad ones, I just don't know if they're operating in a more subtle way.
And it's not just reporters in the newsroom, it's candidates. How many candidates have I turned down because I'm like, boo-boo, I am not going to cover your crap, all right? I'm not going to be your shield, and I'm going to, rat you out if you don't stop this behavior. And it's been tough. And Maureen, we didn't also mention the other elephant in the room is that we're now in the internet age. As I often tell people, all of those great tools that my ex-boss created when he invented the internet. Al Gore. And I mean, and now you have all kind of shaming, all kind of, defamation, slutty, I can't even tell you. I've been called just about everything on the internet, and it doesn't bother me because I have thick skin. I tell people that, the only thing black about my skin is that it's thick. There's some thick stuff. You can't rub this off. And, but they come at women in such a way that is just disgraceful, embarrassing, and shameful. And, it's one of the leading reasons why we don't have more women candidates. There's no reason in the world why women should not represent at least 50% of our legislatures, right? There's no reason why we should not have more rooms in the boardroom or as CEOs or CFOs. But I'm telling you, the higher you go up that chain, the more difficult it becomes. And the attacks are just unrelenting. So we got to make sure that we prepare young girls for careers, whether it's in journalism, in politics, academia, media. It doesn't matter, sports. And that's why I cheer every time I see a woman covering the NFL. I just wish I had time to cover the damn NFL. Boo, can you imagine me in one of them rooms? Your ass could run faster. And I would go right there. I would go straight to his ass, all right? And I would tell him, because he's not using the appropriate body parts to, move. But, of course, I'm not there yet. But there's still time for us to make some remarkable changes to ensure that no one is ever left behind and that we use the full talent pool. I think this country needs it more now than ever before, to use the talents of everybody, and especially women.
I'm thinking of you as a future NFL reporter.
Oh, girl, I can't wait. Oh, Judy.
I was just going to add that the problem also for women sometimes isn't only men, it's women.
Ooh,
because that first and second generation of women, they were feminists, but when they got to the top, the problem was, you saw that at one point, 4 or 5 of the Hollywood studios were run by women, which was great, but sometimes the women liked being the only woman in the room. And so they weren't really trying to broaden it out. And, at the Times, this is how this problem developed. There was a woman editor and who was a good friend of mine, and I had 2 female clerks in a row who were super talented. One of them is now the Times Chicago bureau chief, and one of them is at the Washington Post. She was the White House reporter and won 2 Pulitzers in the last few years. And I kept trying to get the Times to give them a shot, kept arguing with my friend to give them a shot as a, cub reporter or something. We had a program for that. And finally I pushed her and she goes, no, it's not going to happen. And I said, why not? And she goes, because people will think I'm just helping my girlfriend, meaning me. And I'm like, well, what do you think men did for centuries? Let's get with it. But I think women have had a problem with how they deal with power with women, too.
I'm glad you put that on the table. I used to tell my female friends, being the only woman in the room is tokenism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Being the only 2 women, that's window dressing. Yeah, 3 or more. I'm like what they say in the Bible. When 2 or more are gathered, then Jesus is going to come. Well, when 3 or more women, then Mary and Martha and everybody else is there too. And by the way, speaking of women, if they ever wrote the Gospels according to the sisters, the brothers were in hiding. They had left. They were not there to see anything go down with Jesus. They were scared. And yet the women stayed. They stayed. Read the Bible. They stayed. I'm Catholic, I know. They stayed and they saw everything. They were the best witnesses. Jesus had to go back and Thomas said, well, I don't know, because they were in hiding. The women were there. But they don't want us to know that about the women of the Bible. And if the Bible was ever told from the perspective of women, every time God had to talk to a man, he had to first get a woman. So that's why I know she is up there. Men were often sleeping, dreaming, trying to figure it out. The women were awake. And God appeared. There you have it. We're going to go to church now. There you have it. That's right. Believe that.
I mean, this could go on. I love it. I love it. Let's talk about some of the women who have reached the top. Maureen, you just wrote a fabulous piece a couple of days ago
Yes.
about Speaker Pelosi.
Yes.
Talk, and I mentioned the quoting her 30 years ago. But talk about spending that time that you did with her and what you discovered that was beyond what you'd already observed. About how has she survived in this environment that we're describing? What are the secrets to her success, having overcome and overcome and overcome?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot since I wrote the piece and talking to some of our top male Capitol Hill reporters, and I really think that part of the reason it took so long for male pundits and people to give Nancy Pelosi her due was that she's a very womanly woman and very feminine. You know, she wears the most gorgeous Jimmy Choo stiletto. She told me she likes her shoes in suede because they're like bedroom slippers, the high heels. And she doesn't mind talking about that stuff, or, she doesn't dwell on it, but she doesn't shy away from it. Congresswoman Issue, her best friend there, says she's satin and steel. So she's very feminine, but she is totally, hard as nails when she wants something or to pass a bill. And I love the fact that she doesn't think that's an either-or thing, that she has to, when I came up, there was a famous book called, How to Dress Like a Man. Women in the workplace were supposed to dress like men, and we had these little fake ties we were supposed to wear, and we were supposed to act like men. And so I love the fact that she was able to use her power as a woman and be totally tough as a woman. But I also think that is probably why it took, and some of my male colleagues, so long, who have only just begun to realize that this was probably the best speaker in history. And I called John Boehner, and he, I said, so do you think she was the best speaker in history? And he's like, absolutely. And John Boehner cried when he went to her portrait unveiling, and he cried for her. And, I just love the way she wields power without, unapologetically. You know how all these books have come out about women in recent years, how to be confident, how to be more confident. And it's just like, why? Why do women in this day and age still need coaching on that? And she doesn't. She's just completely unapologetic and completely herself. And I was talking to the lieutenant governor last night, and she had some great insights about it. Nancy was one of her mentors, and she was just saying her magic was that she did it invisibly. She was never out there bragging or trying to take credit for what she was doing. She was very diplomatic, but also she knew how to count. She came up in the Baltimore machine politics, and the woman knew how to count. She was just sitting there watching Kevin McCarthy not know how to count, and she's like, you've got to know how to count.
I recommend Maureen's piece if you haven't already read it.
Please.
Donna, let's talk about another powerful woman right now, the Vice President, Kamala Harris.
Yes.
There's a story in the Washington Post this week with, frankly, some criticisms of her from Democrats. Whether she's a vice presidential running mate in 2024 with Joe Biden, or whether she's a candidate in her own. Are these criticisms legitimate, or are we looking at sexism, racism here?
Ooh, well, as Maureen was talking about Speaker Pelosi, it just reminded me of, if I had to list 5 people in the world that I'm fearful of crossing, she's on the list. You don't cross Nancy Pelosi in politics. And what I've admired most about her from the time she came on Capitol Hill until now is that she spends so much time getting to know her members. In my class that I teach at Georgetown, Women in American Politics, I have a special class designed to talk about political ambition. and how for years, I mean, because ambition lies at the heart of American politics, and she embodies it. And I love that about her. I love the fact that when she stepped foot on Capitol Hill after Sally Burton convinced her to take the seat because she was not doing well, she was dying of cancer, Pelosi came on the Hill. She got an assignment on appropriation and intelligence, and then she went directly to help raise money for the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And from that position, she got to know every member who was elected. So she knew not only your name, but your background, your spouse, your children, your grandchildren, and she kept score. So she embodies something that I wish more women in American politics, more women, period, and that is ambition. Now, Judy, so full disclosure, when that moment came in 2020, we knew the then Vice President Joe Biden had made a commitment to put a woman on a ticket, which was great. And a few of my friends gathered, and we decided that we would not only support him, but we would indeed, say we want a black woman. I was probably one of the last people to say that. And not because I didn't support a black woman. I was one of the last because as a former campaign manager and as somebody who actually has picked a vice president or helped pick a vice president, I was for Joe Lieberman, and I can tell you that story later. You can read one of my damn books. I wrote a great, eloquent chapter on that process. I was the only person for Lieberman. And everybody kept looking at me like, you for Joe Lieberman? I'm from Joe Lieberman. Why? I said, I wouldn't be sitting here as campaign manager had it not been for Joe Lieberman and people who were ready, courageous enough to go down to Mississippi, courageous enough to go down south to ensure that we had civil rights. Joe Lieberman did that as a student at Yale. And I knew that from my ex-boss, Eleanor Holmes Norton. He was one of 3 candidates left, and the other 2 had no commitment to civil rights, no commitment to equal justice. Lieberman did. So I fought for Joe Lieberman, and I had no qualms about that. And so I kept asking myself, if Joe Biden comes to me, I know Joe Biden, and he says to me, well, Donna, why do you want a black woman? And I said, it's about damn time. And so after we made that commitment, then we all had to do this huge search. I'm making it short, because I haven't written a book about this one yet. And it was the most challenging period of my life because there were several black women in contention. And we had to choose just one. And in that process, we lost some friends. They stopped speaking to us. That's good, let's gifts. No Valentine card for you. Okay, we're not friends no more. And when it came down to why Kamala, we said, look, she was a candidate, and while she fell short, she would have the backing of her home state, and some of y'all might know there are 55 electoral votes here. Do you count? And we knew that she could help him broaden the coalition, reach voters that he could not reach, and essentially get to 270 electoral votes. We didn't say anything else. And when that decision came down in August, I was one of the few people who got a call, and I was so excited. I called the president of Howard University because she's a graduate of Howard University, and at the time I was at Howard along with Georgetown. Now, where do I stand today on Kamala Harris? I'm still with Kamala Harris. I am going to support her. When my best friend told me it's 4 years, I said, damn, 4 years? I don't even date people that long. I can't do 4 years. I'm doing 4 years. And I'm going to continue to support her. Yeah, are there a lot of tropes out there about Kamala? Likability, electability? I want somebody today to come before the Democratic Party or I'm not saying Democratic voters, I'm saying the party. We get to make the first selection. She has to win the nomination. And if not Joe, who? So she is going to be a nominee as vice president along with Joe Biden. That's where we stand today. Will it change? Possibly. Now, has she been criticized for, I don't want to name all of them, but let's give one. She's changed so many staffers. Well, there have been a lot of change in period at that White House. And yet she's been able to do the job that Joe Biden asked her to do. He's a former vice president. So he said, this was on my plate when I was vice president. I want you to put all of this on your plate. And then some more. And she has performed well. I'm going to say one last thing, because I said I haven't written this book yet. Last summer, when everyone was saying the Democrats should not be talking about choice, reproductive freedom, etc., Kamala said, I'm going to continue to talk about it. She went to practically from Michigan to Wisconsin to Pennsylvania, meeting with state lawmakers down to Florida, North Carolina. She didn't take her eyes off the prize. And on election night, when Democrats did not experience a bloodbath, the number one issue was inflation. The number two issue was abortion and choice and freedom. She gets no credit. Vice presidents of the United States will never get credit. They are invisible. They're undefined. Remember, their biggest job title is just in case. I used to sit on Air Force 2 next to the guy. He had the codes. I had the Bible. Just in case. She's done more than just be somebody who's waiting in the wings. And unfortunately, her full story has not been told, and that's something that I believe I must do, because there's another story that needs to be told about Kamala Harris and her leadership inside this White House, and I hope to be able to tell that story. And you can judge for yourself. Not everybody like my gumbo, but I tell you one thing, after you have my gumbo, you're going to compare every other bowl or cup to what you just had. Believe that.
So Maureen, what part of Kamala Harris's story would you add, and what about the other women? We've already got Nikki Haley announcing she's running.
Yeah, this is not so much about Kamala, but I would like to say that the issue of likability is a very thorny issue for women. So I did a Times Magazine piece about why only 1% of the top 100 grossing movies were women directors a few years ago. And I interviewed dozens and dozens of women directors about that. And, you know, they told me that when scripts came in, male executives would always write in the margins, make the woman character more likable. They never did that for men. So it's a genuine issue. Now, that being said, I interviewed Jerry Brown here a few years ago, and I asked him about it in relation to Hillary, and he goes, look, if you're not likable, the voters are going to throw you out, and that happened to me, Jerry Brown said, and I'm a man. So it's, you know, with Hillary, some of her women advisors put out talking points like, if people bring up the likability issue, they're misogynist. But it's human nature. That is how presidents get elected and other politicians. You know, it's like, do you want to have a beer with them? Would you leave your kids with them? It's likability. So you can't legislate people against talking about it. They're still going to feel it. So all I'm saying is it's a very complicated issue for women.
Is it harder, though, for women to be likable and thought to be able to do the job than
this brings me back to Nancy Pelosi, because what I love about her is she doesn't give a damn. She's just herself. She's not trying to be more likable. I think Hillary, you know, got kind of wrapped around the axle on this and was trying to be all cuddly and likable in her second campaign. And I think she would have been better off with the Tina Fey bitch is the new black, the picture of her in the sunglasses on her BlackBerry, just tough. I think she was beyond gender. She didn't need, usually with women candidates, the problem for president, the problem is, are they going to be able to bomb a country if we want to? But nobody asked that about Hillary, so she didn't have to worry about it. I mean, I just wish she had acted more like Nancy does and not worried about it.
Well, the norms are different in America. I mean, everyone respected the Queen, head of state and head of church. I mean, you just did this when you saw her. All right? Badass. She ain't bombed nobody, at least I don't know. All right? But in American politics, we don't have that visible symbol. We don't have those those characteristics that often give women, like men, an edge, or men are more decisive. Women, oh, I don't know, they take so long to make a decision. And when a woman is decisive and tough, then she's a bitch. I mean, it's almost like we can't win. So I'm just reminding everybody that visibility is viability, and we need more. The more women step up, the more women who lead. And pretty soon we're going to see more and more women leading. So the first one won't be the anomaly. The first one won't be picked on. The first one will not have to go through all of this. I guarantee people, when we look back 20 years from now and look at the reign or the leadership of Hillary Clinton, it's just like the leadership of Shirley Chisholm. You will see that they opened doors that had been closed, and they inspired a new generation of women to take their seats at the table. So that's what we have to think about long term. Because in the short run, oh hell, it ain't easy being the first of any doggone thing. Trust me. You get your you know what cut up. But is it worth it? You're absolutely right, it's worth it. And that's why when we start talking about this debt ceiling, we're going to see four women who are the leading appropriators in the House and the Senate and the director of OMB. It's going to be 5 women who will be making these tough decisions and tough calls. And maybe America one day will look and say, Patty Murray did that? Susan Collins, Kate LaGrange, and Rosa DeLauro, and Shalonda, yeah, they did that. It ain't just Kevin and Joe. The women are in the house too.
So what do you say? You said it's tough for the first one. It's also tough for the second, third, fourth, and here we are. But what do you say to young women, Maureen, who come to you and they want advice about, do I stick it out? How much do I put up with? Do I keep going? In journalism.
Yeah, I mean, the young women who have worked for me have become spectacularly successful. And I still think journalism's an amazing profession for women. You just have to advise them case by case. I guess, each thing is different. We're still negotiating our way through, and you just deal with each problem as it comes up.
Yeah, I'm asking because there are folks here who have daughters, nieces, granddaughters even, grandnieces.
Yeah.
What should they be saying, Donna?
Why you? Because there's no one better. And why now? Because tomorrow's not soon enough. I encourage them to go for it. Yamiche is one of my students. She took my class in 2003. I'm telling y'all my age, I don't care. I love my babies. They're all my babies, young and restless, searching for tomorrow with one life to live. And I can't have enough children. I can't inspire enough young people to take their seats at the table, to go in the room, fearful, but to find their own way, to do it differently than other people. We need more women, more men too. We got to provide hope. There are too many of our citizens who live on the outskirts of hope. And if we don't find ways for them to get into the circle of opportunity, we're going to lose them. We're losing them. They're losing faith in democracy. They're losing faith in capitalism. They're losing faith in church, religion. Hell, they're going to lose faith in me. But I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm going to be that lifeline of hope for them, to tell them that there's a place at the table for them. We need more Maureens and more Judy. I wouldn't be here had it not been for these 2 remarkable women and their work, for challenging me, for pushing me, and for showing me how to lead with grace. So I'm going to inspire them.
Let's give a hand to the amazing Donna Brazile and the amazing Maureen.
Shut up, you.